Sorry, had a little challenge with the recording. So we are welcoming Nancy Boss with Studio Boss and Madeline Pratt with Fearless in Training. This is the second time Madeline has shared with us, so welcome back, Madeline. Next slide. Just a reminder, as always, that we do have a dedicated page on the KEDA website on all things COVID. It is updated on a regular basis, often more than once a day, where you can find all things COVID. And we are reminding you that there are new rules for PPP loans for the forgiveness. And there is a deadline set. And for those questions that you may have, we do have Jamie Forsyth with us today. And as always, a reminder, any questions are put in chat so that we can address them. And if you have not had the opportunity to view the county's Pathway to Recovery playbook, this is well done and probably one of the best we've seen. And then the toolkit for reopening by the Madrona Group has lots of videos and checklists and assistance for those of you going from one phase to another. And then the chambers have also provided a launch toolkit that links from each of their websites in Kitsap County. And with that, we're going to start quickly with a poll, just as we always do, to see who is in attendance today. And as everything lately has been about loans, that's the question. So, which apply to you regarding the EIDL or the PPP loan? And then the second part, if you did not receive one or apply for one. Now people are starting to vote. It was a little slow in the beginning. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the polling. So more than half that responded have not applied for either. And the majority of those that responded said either they were not eligible, they can make it without it. And then we'll be curious to see if they posted in chat why they did not apply. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Madeline, who has some great info for you, and we look forward to her sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen share started. And while I'm doing that, today is really a day where we're going to be talking about best practices in presentations. And so my side of the house, I'm going to be talking a lot about in terms of design and how to really prepare yourself to stand out from a webinar perspective. And I'm curious to ask y'all, just to get some participation going, if you wouldn't mind chiming in the chat, what do you want to create your next presentation about? If you're joining this session, maybe you're thinking about, the story you could share with the world or the content you could be bringing to light. So just chime in the chat. Is there an idea you have about, what would your next presentation be about? I'd love to see those shares. And as you're chiming in, I just want to tell you real briefly about myself. If you weren't on the last session that I was on, my name is Madeline Pratt. I'm an expert in technology and I lead a creative consultancy called Fearless in Training. And we like to say that at Fearless in Training, we forge founders on the path to entrepreneurial equality. So we're really focused on helping people with business strategies around their branding, their marketing, their technology, and their business development to be able to stand out and really build a business that not only allows them to create opportunity for themselves, but also allows to make the world a better place. I'm looking at the chat real quick and I'm seeing some great answers. So I heard somebody say, I'm going to be talking about how singing impacts mental health. I'm going to do an info session for students to increase enrollment. We're creating presentations for recruiting. content about thriving and changing times. These are all amazing ideas. And I think that what we're seeing, one of the benefits we're seeing coming out of this experience is the fact that there is so many opportunities for us to share our expertise online. And so today I'm going to be walking through some of the foundations of the ways that we can really make sure that when we're presenting, we're creating content that is really, really engaging for our audience. So one thing we're going to start talking about is creating engaging slide decks. I'm a big design nerd myself, and I have an amazing design team that I work with. And really, this is one of those things that we often overlook because we say, oh, I don't really know how to use PowerPoint. And so I'm going to talk through some of the best ways that you can actually kind of take advantage of tools and templates on the internet to really make great slides. And then I'm going to be talking a little light level in terms of just preparation for preparing the presentation itself. Nancy is going to be our expert on the actual speaking component, but I'm going to walk you through some processes in terms of how you can outline and build a great presentation. And then last, we're going to close with talking about, how to put this out there to attract the right people. So like I mentioned before, me and my team have a lot of marketing expertise to bring to the table. And so we're going to talk through some just high level ideas on how to market your webinar to bring the right people in the room. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about your slides. So one of the first things that I think is really important to think about is how you actually go about structuring your presentations. And so the first tip I always have is what I just did here with you. I set up with an agenda. And I did that intentionally because I think it's really important to remember that when we're giving a presentation, we're really taking people on a journey. We're telling them a story. And the way I like to structure my stories is, have a little bit of a prologue. So what are we teaching? Why are we qualified to teach that topic? And what's our agenda for the day? That's the precursor to the story we're going to tell. And then we move into 3 core topics. And I'm really big on minimizing and boiling it down to 3. There's been a lot of interesting neuroscience done about the fact that people really only have the capacity to remember about 3 big takeaways. And so I oftentimes structure my presentation to really be centered around 3 core points. So my first point is usually a foundational point. It's something that builds a layer of understanding so we're all operating on the same playing field. And then my second topic is always a little bit of peak information. Maybe it's like the best nuggets that I want you to take away. And then my third topic is our ending. That's where we bring it home and we kind of wrap everything up with a sense of like how I could turn this into action. And then we have an epilogue to our story. So that's where we have our takeaways, our questions, and our calls to action. So that's what I mean in terms of giving ourselves some structure. So think about when you're building content, when you're building slides, how would you create them in a way that acknowledges that starting moment, that prologue, then that beginning, that first topic, a middle, an ending, and then an epilogue. And the big thing about that epilogue is making sure that in that moment, again, we're talking about our takeaways, like if there's an item or a resource we're giving away so people can continue their learning, or maybe if there's a place they need to go to get that material or get in contact with you, that's also a takeaway. That's also where we're setting ourselves up to ask questions and get feedback from our audience on the experience. And then there's a call to action. So at the end of any great presentation, you're going to ask your folks to go on another journey with you, whether that's going out and signing up for your newsletter, or signing up for the next presentation, as Kathy always tells us to do, or maybe it's filling out a survey. So always closing the moment with that next action that people can take. So I know a lot of folks that want to give presentations to the world, but they hesitate because they're not design inclined. And so they're a little bit worried about, how do I create a slide deck that's going to look nice? And I'm here to tell you that there are lots and lots of great tools and tricks out there that can make your presentations really beautiful without you having to become a design expert overnight. So one thing that you can always do is just use existing templates inside your platform. So if you're using something like a Google Suite or an Office 365 suite, or you've got a Mac and you've got Keynote, if you go into those softwares, there's always a set of templates in there. Now, my recommendation, and I think this is really, really important to remember, is that if you're using those softwares, don't fiddle with the templates. So the templates have been designed to be structured in an appeasing way, in a way that looks aesthetically enjoyable. And so one thing that people do is they maybe start out with a template and then they change the text to a font that they like, and then they change the graphics and they change all these things rather than staying true to the design styling of the template. And so if you just want to work with the software you have and you want to leverage those templates, take advantage, but do your best not to fiddle and change the way the elements appear, but rather just fill in the content as you have it. So that's a great way to just take advantages of the resources available to you. Now, the next thing you can do if you want to take it a little bit further is use one of the amazing free template tools that are out on the internet. So my two favorites are listed here. Slides Go is a website, you can Google search for it, and they have catalogs of just these beautiful templates, and they're styled and you can download them to either PowerPoint or Google Slides, and they're pre-built. And I really love Slides Go for business presentations. If I'm going to give a consulting session with the client, I love leveraging their templates because they have great things inside of them, like a library of icons that are already designed for the templates. They have pre-built graphs sometimes. They have pre-built like other kind of visuals and vector images that you can utilize. And so you don't have to do a lot of searching for things on the internet. And I've found oftentimes that they catalog their presentations in different styles. So you might even be able to find a presentation that's almost identical to what you need to give. And so you really just have to fill in the content, which is really great and speeds up that process. Another great tool that's very similar in terms of the library they offer is Canva. So this template that I use today is a Canva template. I modified it to match my brand colors and populated my own information. But besides that, this template was really pre-built, and Canva does cost money if you sign up for the premium version of the service, but it is a freemium app that you can use online to build really beautiful presentations. And then the third option is if you plan to do a lot of presenting, if you're somebody who's going to be out, and speaking is a really part of who you are as a business or a brand, there's always the opportunity to invest in an expert. So I have a whole team that specializes in doing design work. We build out presentation decks as part of our brand work for clients so that they have materials and templates that's built around their business rather than having to modify an existing template to match the look and feel of your brand. So again, your three options here: use a template inside of an existing platform, just don't fiddle with it. Use one of these amazing tools to get other templates for free, and then also consider paying an expert to design something that's specific for your brand. Now, this other element that I think is really important, that's oftentimes a mistake we see when people are building presentations, is that they throw too many words on a slide. And what happens when people have to sit there and read a slide is they're paying attention to the slide and they stop paying attention to you. And so if somebody needs to read a lot of materials to contextualize what you're offering or saying, make that a takeaway item. Maybe that's a guide or preparatory material that you offer your audience prior to attending the session, or something you hand them as a follow-up material that they can review after the fact. I also think it's really important to not do what I like to call giving away the goodies. So giving away the goodies is putting all the information out there so that somebody can kind of walk away and say it was their ideas or their information. And so by designing a slide deck that's a little bit minimal in terms of the text you offer, you're also not going to overwhelm your audience while remaining a little bit of a foothold on your intellectual property so that somebody can't go out and steal your words and call them your own. Now, the next piece that I want to recommend when developing slide decks is choosing really high quality visuals. So this is making sure that your visuals are not stretched, they're not pixelated, and they're also cohesive in nature. So for example, if I was using this template with black and white imagery, I would make sure that that's something I consistently do throughout the presentation so that it feels cohesive from a styling perspective. And it's really important to choose from well-curated libraries because visuals really enhance the story that we're sharing. Now, I have a personal mission that I think is really important to also make sure that the imagery we use is inclusive. So what I mean by this is making sure that your images aren't just of white folks, especially if you're working with a diverse demographic. It's really important to make sure that the visuals you're using are representative of the folks that you're working with and aim to work with. And so there's a site that I really love. It's called Tonal. It's spelled Tonl. This is actually a Seattle-based startup started by a Black woman named Karen Okonkwo, and they curate this beautiful, beautiful library of diverse stock imagery. Canva also does a decent job of curating a nice library. And then there's also a resource online called Unsplash, which is a curated library of free stock imagery. So those are all resources you can go to. And so again, what we're looking for when we choose imagery is that, you know, these are large enough images to be presented full screen so that they're not pixelated, they're properly sized, and they should also be nice to look at. And then we also just want to make sure that they're consistent in terms of their look and feel, they're relevant to the topic you're talking about, and they're also inclusive. All right, now this last piece in terms of design styling is to just make sure that you're making it your own. So one of the things that people often forget, especially if they're leveraging templates inside of a software, is to take some time to put your stamp on it. So what I mean by this is to first and foremost include your logo. You want people to remember that this was a product you built for your brand, and so they can go back and remember who you were and kind of have that visual styling represented for you. You want it to be memorable, and so you also want to capture the feeling of your brand in other ways. So for example, I have done in this slide template, making sure that my brand coloring and my brand font are reflected throughout so that this is a material that matches the way we present ourselves in other ways. And then also, I'm protecting my IP. So you'll look at the bottom corner here, I've got a little copyright material to make sure that this is not only looks like it's a representation of my brand and consistent with our style guides, but it's also protecting my intellectual property and trademark to make sure that other people can't go out and steal this material. And I don't want to go down that track too far, but it's really important to just make sure that beyond just representing your brand aesthetics, that you're putting together a presentation that, if need be, you can hold up and say, no, this was our intellectual property. Okay, so that covers what I'm going to share today in terms of style from a design sensibility. If you have questions, I'm going to have time for them at the end, so feel free to throw those into the chat. But now I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about the ways in which I go about preparing presentations, because I think it's really helpful to, if you're sitting down and you're scratching your head about like, how do I set up a great presentation? Let's talk through some tips. So first and foremost, if you're new to presenting, I always say, start with a topic that you could talk about for 10 hours or more without stopping. You know, it's really, really hard. It's a muscle memory thing to learn how to present, and it's hard to do it from scratch. And so if you can start with a topic where if I was to take away my notes and I couldn't look at anything but my screen, I would be able to continue on that conversation without feeling awkward or stuttering. Another thing to think about is that when you're creating your content, you know, always begin with an outline. So I'm a really, really big outline person. I think this is my background in writing essays, but I always sit down and really create the architecture of what I'm going to present prior to diving in and creating the content. And so I always start, again, with that structure I talked about first. What is my information up front, that epilogue that I need to share? Then what are my three main points, my beginning, middle, end? And then what is my thing that I want people to remember, or what is the action I want people to take? And that information forms the outline. And then based off of that outline is when I start building my slide deck to correspond to the outline and also to the topics I want to really people to take away. So when crafting this outline, it's really important to just ask yourself this question of like, what do you really want people to remember? What do you really want them to take away from this session? And then use that to inform the way you structure your presentation. Now, I just want to say here that it's really, really important that when you're structuring your content, you're designing it in a way that's meant to captivate and compel action. So we don't just give webinars to just like sit on the internet all day talking to people. We do it to get people to take a next step. You know, I saw all your shares, so maybe some of you, you know, I was thinking about, for example, if you're doing a presentation to do recruiting, well, you want somebody to take the action of then get recruited. Or if you're doing an informational presentation, you might want to have them take a next action by signing up for a course or signing up for some sort of service from your business. So thinking about, what is that action you want people to take, and then creating the content in a way that is engaging, meaningful, consistent, informative, and ultimately inspiring people to take that next step with you and your brand. Now, I gotta just remind you all, this is something that takes practice. You can get help, you can hire a coach, you can try it out and then get feedback from other people. Nancy, as you'll see, is an absolute pro at speaking and presenting. I'm only good at this because it's something I've done for a really long time. After you've given 100 webinars, you could do it in your sleep. But remember that practice is really important. So I practice anything I'm going to present in advance so that I don't sound like a robot and I'm not sitting here just reading off my notes. They're here to guide me, but I'm also showing up as a human so that I can be engaging with you as I'm presenting. Nancy's going to give us even more tips in terms of how to go about showing up as yourself in an engaging way. But remember that when you're creating a presentation, it's important to practice alongside the content you've prepared to make sure that the flow makes sense for your audience and make sure that people are going to be able to resonate with what you're having to share. So the last thing we're going to touch on real quick is just some thoughts in terms of marketing. So I want you to remember that it's really important not just to create a great presentation, but to make sure that you have the right people in the room who are going to resonate with what you have to share. So first, you've got to have a clear understanding of who that audience is. Why are you making this webinar in the first place? Who do you want to attract? And then you'll have some guidelines in terms of how you can market to them. So the last thing I want to just offer here is just some ideas on how you could get started in putting the word out into the world about your webinar experience to attract folks in. So one of the things I love to do is creating some sort of teaser video, just a little preview of who you are and what you're sharing and who it could benefit so that people get a sense of what it could be like to sit down with you for an hour and learn from you. Another thing you could do is run some sort of paid advertisement. You could leverage platforms like Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn to put that teaser out into the world in a bigger way to attract in folks that you want to attend. And especially if you have a good targeted demographic, ads and even without too much of a spend, just a couple $100 can be a great way to get the right folks in the room. Other actions could be creating an email campaign, running a promotion on your website, so like a banner ad across the top, just saying, checking out our next webinar, click here to register. Writing a blog post that contextualizes what you're gonna share and then has a call to action at the bottom of join the webinar. And then of course, sharing on social media. So if you're writing a blog post or you're creating a teaser video and you have a following on social media, sharing it out and then also asking other people you're connected to spread the word is a great way to start attracting people to the content you're creating. Now, of course, you don't have to just take one of these actions in a vacuum. You can take 1, 2, 3 in combination or all 6. These are just some ideas of how you could get started. So I just want to close with this quote, which is a reminder that great marketing is about telling consistent stories, testing new ideas, and making meaningful connections with the audience you aim to serve. So just remember that when you're taking on something new, like creating your first webinar, creating new presentations out for the world, there's always learning to be had. And as long as you're showing up consistently and improving every time, you're going to start making meaningful connections with people through sharing your story via webinars. So with all that said, I want to just open the floor for any quick questions that people might have. And my call to action for all of you is that my team and I are hosting a webinar next week called Social Media for Social Impact. This is a session where my creative director is going to be talking about how to leverage social media to share your values and talk about the things that are going on in the world right now in a way that's authentic and consistent with your brand. So it's a free webinar if anybody wants to check out and learn more about some social media skill sets. And if you want to connect on a call with me, I'll also share my contact information as well. But I just want to hop into the chat real quick and see if we've had any questions come through. I'm going to stop my screen share. And let's see, I haven't seen any questions, but feel free to ask them. And I'm going to just actually pull my screen share up one more time just to share my contact details. And I'll also put them in the chat. So if you want to connect with me in any way, shape, or form, here's my calendar link, my email address, website, social media, all the goodies. So you can screenshot that and I can put them in the chat as well.
Thank you, Madeline. And if people have a question pop up, oh, here's one.
Yeah.
Just popped in. What is the ideal length of a presentation?
Ooh, that's a great question. It really depends on the nature of the content you're presenting. So I think that at a minimum, you know, if you really want people to get engaged and learn, 30 minutes is a bare minimum. This might be like a general informational session if I was doing something that was super high level, because you really have to have that time at the end to have, you know, a little bit of Q&A and a little bit of intro at the front. And so, you know, that's really, you're creating 15 to 20 minutes of content and then padding your space at the end. Now, if I'm doing teaching and training, I'm looking at 60 to 75 minutes. And then sometimes if I'm doing something that's a really, really deep dive training, I'll extend it to 90 minutes. But in terms of attention spans, especially with how much we're hanging out on Zoom these days, it's not great to go much longer than that, especially, I mean, you could do like, if you're doing a training or a teaching session, I would just break it up if you're doing anything longer than that, just so people have a little bit of a brain break in between.
Oh, now somebody's asking about a video pre-presentation, like a teaser.
Like a teaser. So how to go about constructing that? My recommendation is keep it to less than 60 seconds, because on social media, different platforms have limitations in terms of how much content can be previewed or used in an ad format. 60 seconds is kind of the standard. You also think about like a trailer, like a movie trailer, like we tune out after a certain point, and think about it as an opportunity to just highlight the top notes of what you'll share. Like if somebody was like, pitch me in 60 seconds what you're going to be presenting, share that, and then also share it with a level of excitement and engagement so people feel like they've got to come to this session to learn more.
Super. Oh, best practice for number of slides.
Ooh. So this varies depending on folks, because I'm somebody who really emphasizes that limiting of text. I tend to do a slide per minute for my presentations. Sometimes I'll do like a slide per 2 minutes, like in my longer style presentations. But I think in order to retain people's attention, it's actually important to move through our slides a little bit quickly. It also allows the slides to be a bulky takeaway material. You know, I'm going to give you guys these slides today as a takeaway material. And so that feels like substantial, because it's I think in total 15 or 16 slides. That can feel overwhelming for some folks. I also know people who like to present, you know, primarily themselves and have just like 1, 2, or 3 slides. So it's a little bit up to your style and purview, but I just say, as long as you're not putting too much text on them, you're okay to kind of work in a way that's style best for you.
Super. Okay, I think that's it for now. And of course, people can keep posting questions, and if we have time at the end, when it's, you know, any question at all, then we'll address them then. So thanks, Madeline. Great info. And I wish I didn't have a conflict next Wednesday for your webinar.
It'll be recorded, so if you
Okay.
can't make it and you want to sign up, Madeline Sperber, who's done a couple of these KEDA presentations, is my creative director, so she'll be on there teaching.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to turn one more poll quickly. So this one's easy. Are you scheduled or planning an online training, presentation, or speech this summer? And we know some of you responded that you were, because when Madeline asked, you posted in chat. Wow, got a lot of busy people. That's great. I'm going to end it. The vast majority of people have voted. So 3/4 of people viewing today are going to be doing some type of presentation or training. So that is awesome. So Nancy, if you want to get your slide up and running. Nancy has done a class for us in our PTAC, and it was fantastic. So as with Madeline, you're in for a treat. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you. Tech working okay? Can see the slide? Can hear me all right? Fabulous. It is such a pleasure to be here. And I want everyone to know that I am here for the people of Kitsap to help you with your speaking needs. So please reach out if you'd like more of anything we're about to discuss. You're going to see me today going a little bit back and forth between sharing and stop sharing. For some of you, that might be great. And for some of you, it might be jarring to suddenly see my face pop up here. So it wouldn't be a bad idea if you put into the comment box, the chat box, what you think of that, me going back and forth like that. So the first thing that we'd like to talk about today, or that I'd like to talk about, is performance anxiety or fear of speaking. Statistics say that this is a big, big deal. So if you feel this way, you are not alone. You're perfectly normal. And I want to give everyone a chance right now to reset your energy. We're going to take about 30 seconds for a couple of big body expanding breaths. And this is a useful tool for audience engagement. I'm asking you to do something, but it also doubles as a useful tool for me as the speaker to improve my own focus. So just take us 30 seconds now for a couple of big breaths. One more of those. Great. I'm sure you felt your energy has changed, hopefully for the good. We all have an inner critic. And that's the first thing to discuss when it comes to performance anxiety or fear of public speaking. We all have a voice that is telling us that all the things we are doing are wrong. Isn't that amazing that we all have this in common? And there is plenty of neurological science explaining why. But our job as the person in the spotlight is to get over it. Get to the point where we can ignore that inevitable inner critic, that we can ignore that inevitable inner critic when we are presenting, teaching, or speaking. That takes education and it takes practice, but it is well worth it. I can tell you that from my personal experience as a person who had debilitating performance anxiety, it can be overcome. One of the most useful ways to tackle it is outlined in these next two slides. So going back to screen sharing and technology, darn it. How do I get there? Sorry, you're looking at that one. There we go. All right. Step one of this plan, of the 80-20 practice plan, is when you're learning a new presentation, you spend at least 80% of each practice session in the practice mindset. In other words, acquiring, refining new skills. I should also say refining your slide deck, refining your technology to make sure it's doing for you what you want it to do. And the other 20% of those practice sessions, even if it's just a short phrase or two, is to perform it, to look in the eye of the camera, to make sure you're wearing clothes that aren't rustling and making too much noise. Get your performance ready, get your lighting ready, and focus on being that expert in front of the camera. After that, step two of the plan, as the performance nears, you flip the equation to 20% of it looking for correctness, looking for errors, and 80% of it trusting that you've done your homework, everything's ready, and actually practicing being the presenter, practicing controlling your breath, practicing controlling the tempo of your speaking, and being impactful for your audience. This strategy goes a long way toward enabling you to practice trust and acceptance. Let's see, share screen. Sorry, looking at my script. That's very unprofessional of me, isn't it? The next thing we're going to talk about is to impact your audience as a virtual speaker visually and how to use your slides. The first layer, which includes creating the slides that Madeline just went through, is setting the stage. I'd like you to consider your role in the event. The roles of the attendees and the role of a host are different from the role of a presenter. As a presenter, you need to have a stage set up that decreases distraction and keeps the focus on you and your message. Other than that, follow the guidance from 1,000 different sources online about the basics of setting up your room, your audio, and your camera. Layer two is how to use your space. And here is where things get interesting. Here is where you set yourself apart. You get noticed and you make a good impression. This is where you become an engaging speaker. This is where you use the space available to you. It is so tempting to think of our video presence online as being two-dimensional, like a portrait in Harry Potter, where we can go left or right, but we can't go forward. But that's not true. We're not stuck in a flat space. What we want to do is invite our audience into the room with us. And we do that by using the forward and back body movement. When it's intense and important, I might get right up here. Got to be careful not to get my hand blocking my face. But when it's intense, I can bring myself forward. And when it's a moment to just sit back and bring it in to yourself, I can sit back and do that. You're not stuck in a square, and it's important to use all three dimensions to be more engaging. Some of the best examples of this are news anchors and talk show hosts working from home. Stephen Colbert sits at a desk in a room. You can see him from the waist up so that he can use his whole body in all of his gestures. That's the kind of thing that I would like you to think about. Layer 3, this is where you become very memorable. I'm going to go back to stop sharing my slides. Layer 3 is when your content, well, hopefully your content has already been memorable from the work that you did preparing your slides, but you can help your message have sticking power by also becoming a memorable person. To give context to this, think back to your school years. Think of your best teacher. Why was that person memorable? Did that help make the content more memorable? Absolutely. What class did you take that had dry content, but a teacher brought it to life for you? For me, that was college statistics taught by Professor Brill. So how do we make you memorable? Through audience participation, interaction, physicality, and responsibilities. We've already participated in an example of interaction through the KEDA polls. And even if you didn't answer them, there was a mild responsibility for you. You felt responsible to answer that question, at least in your mind. And Madeline has asked a question that you all answered in chat. These are great ways to increase interaction, which keeps your listeners actively involved. So I'd like to ask a chat question as well. I'd like to know what your favorite professor brought to the class that you can learn from and bring to your presentations. How did that professor keep you engaged? So please post in the chat to the category all panelists and attendees. I'd like to know about your professors, how they engaged you, and perhaps even how you can apply that to your own presentations. I'm seeing these come in. Fantastic. I love it. Yes, excitement and love for the subject. The passion of the speaker coming through carries so much weight. Passion for the subject. For me, for Professor Brill, it was him taking statistics and applying them to things that were in our own lives. For instance, this was college, so it was how many kegs does it take to have, a successful party? Well, statistically, that depends on, and then we would look at those details. So he made it very relevant to our current moment. Yes, as Teresa said, making it personal. Humor and showing interest in the students. That showing interest is important. When you're in a Zoom meeting, I can't see you right now. I'm very interested in you, so I'm imagining you. I'm imagining the person that I'm talking to on the other side. That not only calms my nerve and gives me focus, but it gives me an opportunity to try to connect with you personally. And in some ways, as the speaker, I just have to hope that it's working. Dr. Kumar was experienced and loved his career, which translated to class material. Yes, and the passion of my instructor. So a lot of common threads there. I love it. A higher level of responsibility would be to ask a single audience member or all audience members to do something specific. For instance, if this was a group setting where we could all see each other, I might ask you to raise 5 fingers when I have 5 minutes left. Or I might ask another person to keep an eye out if anyone has raised a hand. Yes, we have a host who can handle this, but if I get you involved as a participant in the room, that increases your investment and your ownership. It increases the investment of ownership of everyone who has a responsibility, which in turn increases the memorability of your talk. In this case, I can't really ask any of you to take a responsibility. So instead, I'll ask all of you to take a responsibility. True, I won't know if you followed through, but hopefully it is something that will benefit both of us so that you would be willing to do what I ask and it would pay off for you too. So I would like to ask you to open a window to LinkedIn and find me and connect with me. And that way, you'll be able to see the things that I post that are on the topics of this presentation, and I will be notified when you do things on LinkedIn and will enjoy reading your content and watching your videos. But you might be surprised to see that if you search my name, Nancy Boss, on LinkedIn, there are a few of us. Who knew there were multiple Nancy Bosses? Up until now, you might have thought Boss was a strange name, but it's my real name, and it means forest in Dutch. Okay, so enough filler talk while you hopefully took that action. I'm giving you a peek behind the curtains, excuse me. Enough filler talk while you hopefully took that action and connected with me on LinkedIn. And hopefully that was enough time. And maybe, since you now know what boss means in Dutch, it's forest, that might make me even more memorable. All right, and going back to sharing screen. We are in layer 3, audience interaction with the chats, audience responsibility by giving the audience member goals. And you'll see here on the bottom is my LinkedIn address if you were wondering about that. And then finally, the last point in this section is audience physicality. Keeping the audience physically active keeps them in the most effective headspace, conducive to focus and learning. This is best if everyone can see each other so that it builds community. And since we can't here, I'll just say it includes asking people to do things like wave your hands, take a stretch, take a breath like we did at the beginning, give a high five. High fives into Zoom are actually quite fun. If anybody else wants to try right now, I know you can't see me or I can't see you, but give me a high five, bam, right there. Doesn't that feel good? And it gets your body moving too. And it also uses that 3-dimensional space. That about covers it. So as a quick review, let me go back over the big points. One is response, get forward here. One responsibility in overcoming nerves is to practice first and make sure your content and setup are solid. And second, to practice performing without the distraction of finding fault with your presentation. When it comes to making a great impression, first, make sure your tools and stage serve you well. Second, use your space in an engaging way. And third, keep your audience actively engaged and physically involved. That does it for the things that I could share during this time. I am so happy for you to email me with questions. I will be adding opportunities for people to practice these skills in a free environment, like a 1-hour Zoom session where 6 of us are there and we just try these things out. So if you want to get emails telling you when those are available, or I'll post it on LinkedIn as well, then here's my email address, nancy@studioboss.com. Kathy, that's about all I have.
Super, thank you. So we should all be looking at things differently now as we get ready for all those training and presentations we're going to be doing this summer. And I, again, am thankful that Nancy and Madeline were willing to share their expertise today, and to know that we have all these great people in Kitsap County that can help us grow our businesses and organizations. So we are opening up for Q&A. It could be anything, you know, from the 2 presentations. It could be about any of the SBA loan programs that are going on. So just post your questions now. I do have thought though, you know, in Zoom, you have the choice of using webinar or meeting. And in meeting, you can put people in breakout rooms. Do you guys have a preference?
I use the webinar mode just because of the fact that I think it's important to kind of like have the presentation styling the way it is. So for example, it's like we're the panelist and then everybody else is an attendee. And if you use the meeting version, it pops everybody in like we are right now, with your camera on and things like that. And you know, that's great for when I'm leading like a collaborative discussion or an actual meeting, but folks can get a little caught off guard if they weren't realizing they were going to be on camera. And of course you can set it up behind the scenes so that the camera doesn't default to on. But I think that for anything that's a presentation style, the webinar version of Zoom is the better one to be using.
Okay.
Sounds good. If it's going to be at all interactive, I like to have the audience be able to see each other, especially if I'm trying to create a feeling of community. But if it's more just straight on education, let's get this information out there, then absolutely this is a fantastic format.
Great. And are there other formats you use besides Zoom?
I've been playing around with well, I haven't been playing around. I've been presenting at other people's content. So there's a platform called On24 that a few of my clients have been using recently. It's great for very large webinars, and it's interesting because it's slightly different than Zoom in terms of the way it has slides and has the chat and things like that. So it's just a different choice. I'm a little like Zoom obsessed, and so it feels a little jarring for me to be in a different platform. There's also a lot of great tools that are coming to the market right now that are designed for more like, I would say, virtual conference experiences. So these are really interesting. Remo is like a platform that I've been around with a couple clients now, where it has these little tables and it has virtual booths, and then it has the ability to do a main stage presentation. So for anybody who's looking to do like more of a conference online, Remo is a platform I'm familiar with.
Okay. So let's see. Kelly said, in normal times, we attend a lot of conferences and I'm always frustrated by how many folks are on their phones, laptops, etc. In other words, not giving the speaker their attention. Is there a good way to playfully get people to not be distracted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is the responsibility of the speaker to keep those people engaged on a regular basis. So it isn't good enough to talk for 20 minutes and then ask a quick question. Instead, you have to keep those people responsible and engaged so that they feel like they actually want to be there. And if they don't pay close attention, they're going to miss something. Do keep in mind, though, there are some people who are better at having something to fidget with or something to do. I'm one of those that if I'm drawing or typing or whatever, I'm actually listening better. And so we have to give some forgiveness for that. Usually those people used to be behind us and to our sides. Now they're right in front of us, and we just have to allow for it.
And I liked what Nancy did in her presentation too, is knowing that people are in front of a laptop, particularly if we're in a virtual environment, we can call people to take action. So Nancy was like, go out to LinkedIn, find me. I know you got your screen there. So, those kind of things can also be great to not only inspire people to take action, but just call people back if they've like opened another browser tab and are wandering off, to bring them back to the actions that you're wanting them to take to get them engaged.
Well, I do know that I find myself listening better if I take notes. So I will have Word open and I'm just typing in bullet points just so that I'm on task. Cindy asks, how do you feel about using whiteboard feature when you're having a partner meeting?
I don't have any experience there. Madeline?
So my only experience recently has been my son has been using it a lot to learn math online. And I do think it's a great feature and functionality. I think that, this is one of the collaboration aspects that we still struggle with, honestly, at our team, because we love doing whiteboard sessions. And I don't find that the virtual experience is nearly the same as all us being in a room together with whiteboard and sticky notes and things like that. The other option you can always do is have two people who have two whiteboards. I've seen a lot of this lately where people have just angled their camera and they've got an actual whiteboard. You could go to Vibe and do that. They've got great whiteboard setups in there with Zoom rooms. So yeah.
Okay, any other questions? We have about 10 minutes, and if you've attended before, I'm not a stickler to going the full hour. So if we don't have any other questions, I'm just going to remind people that next week we have John Keese from Public Health District, Representative Kilmer, and Cole Medina from Kitsap Community Foundation to kind of give us a look back and a look forward. We've all been in this COVID-19 climate for a while now. So we've decided it's a good time to just take a look and see what's ahead for us. So we hope you can join us then. And then Nancy and Madeline and Jamie, if you have any final thoughts or things you want to share.
Oh, we echoed there. I was just going to say thank you so much again for the opportunity to come back and present. And if anyone's interested in connecting further or checking out any of the work we're up to, I put some info in the chat. So, and there'll also be a takeaway material. We created a checklist just to give people some guidance when they're creating these presentations. So keep an eye out for that on the KEDA website too.
Thank you.
Great. I'd like to say thank you as well. And what an honor to get to present here to KEDA and to work together with Madeline to make a well-rounded offering for you guys. Fabulous. I would just say this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for the people of Kitsap Peninsula to easily go out to the world. So don't be scared. Go and do it and make the difference that you can make.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to thank Madeline and Nancy for a great presentations. Those were really wonderful. And just to remind you that if you're a small business owner, we've got some great resources at the Small Business Development Center to help you with in whatever way you're having to pivot because of the new circumstances. And I feel like this is such a buzzkill to bring up the PPP and the economic impact disaster loan again. But I also just want to tell people, for all those people, I know if you're C6, you can't get the PPP, but they've been making that thing so much easier to get full forgiveness, AKA free money. And this is the end. So, you know, if it makes you curious at all about whether there's something in it for you, even if you didn't think so before, definitely reach out, Kitsap SBDC, and I'm happy to walk you through that conversation.
Thanks all. And I consider, of course, you and our past presenters all KEDA partners. We love to be able to connect folks, and don't be surprised if sometime in the future I'm working with a client and I say, you need to talk to Madeline or Nancy. I send people to Jamie all the time. So thank you for being partners, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week and weekend. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.